Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters on Armstrong Television. Chapters is a show that profiles authors, editors, publishers, all sorts of people in the writing world from all across the country. I'm your host, Carter Seaton, and I'm delighted to have you with us today. And I am delighted to also welcome our guest today. He is my writing colleague, R.G. Yoho. R.G., or Bob as I've always known him, is a West Virginia native with a passion for history and tales of the American West. He's the author of 7 Westerns, including the 5-book Kellen Malone series, a work of nonfiction, The 9 Lives of Charles E. Lively, the deadliest man in the West Virginia-Colorado coal mine wars. That's his recent book. He's a former president of West Virginia Writers, along with being a member of the Western Writers of America. He resides in Southeast Ohio with his wife of almost 40 years. They have 3 children, a nephew who's like a son, and 9 grandchildren. Bob, thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you.
And congratulations on this new book. It's fascinating, to say the least. I got to say, I'd never heard of Charles Lively. Maybe that's because I'm not a history buff in terms of the coal mine wars, but of course I knew about the Matewan Massacre, as they called it. Tell us briefly who he was and what role he plays in West Virginia's history.
Charles Lively was born in West Virginia. He was born just around Charleston. He got his coal mining. He was born in 1887. He got his first union card about 1903. He worked as a miner for a long time, somewhere I believe between probably sometime after he got his first union card in 1910, he became affiliated with the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, which worked for the coal companies, intimidating, striking miners, blacklisting them, and worse crimes than that. And along the way, he was working for the Baldwin Felts Company, essentially the coal companies. At the same time, he was working as a miner, and so he was an undercover detective, a spy for the coal companies.
Wow. How did you first learn about him?
I first learned about him wasn't long after I first saw the Matewan movie. Now, the movie Matewan wasn't real accurate as far as Lively's depiction in the film.
But he is in it? Yes,
they show him in it. They actually have him there the day of the shooting, which isn't accurate because Lively was actually at the UMW headquarters in Charleston the day of the actual Matewan shooting. Mm-hmm. But he's, at the time, he was making $225 a month from Baldwin Felts at the time probably the Matewan shooting took place.
That's a lot of money back then.
Yes, it was. And along with what he was making as a coal miner, he was a wealthy man, and you know, espionage pays well apparently.
What made you decide to write about him?
Well, Charles Lively is mentioned almost every book you ever find, Carter, about the coal mine wars. Charles Lively is mentioned in it. His name's in there. Strangely enough, nobody had ever specifically profiled him, and I started probably about 12 years before I published this book, studying him and thinking maybe I might possibly write a book about him. But at that time, there were a whole lot of newspapers still hadn't been digitized. And then it's only in the last few years, a lot of the newspapers became digitized, which meant I could find them and I discovered a lot more things about him than I already knew.
Mm-hmm. And tell me how he managed to get to Colorado and what were his activities about out there? The title says, obviously, that there were coal mine wars out there as well.
Yeah, he went out to Colorado, as best I can tell, about 1910. In fact, he's listed on the census out there in 1910. And he's out there. He was actually a victim of a mine fall incident out there. There was 2 differing reports. One of them said he wouldn't live through it. Another said he survived it. I tend to think maybe that may have been a cover-up for something else he was doing out there at that time. But he went out there to work for him. He worked in the Spanish Peaks region of southern Colorado. And he actually became the vice president of the Levita local out there. And so he was working out there as a spy. He was originally sent out there to investigate a murder of a coal official named John Flockhart, I believe.
And how long did he stay in Colorado?
He stayed in Colorado he'd come back occasionally and he'd visit his wife and maybe a family from time to time. It seemed like he had 9 kids, so he came back to visit occasionally, but he was there from pretty much off and on from about 1910 to almost close to 1920.
And when was the Matewan massacre, the Matewan shootings?
It was May 19th, 1920.
20, okay. So he had just come back, apparently.
Yeah, he actually had a restaurant set up, which was right below the UMW headquarters. It was downstairs from there. He had a restaurant, and he probably had that restaurant about 2 weeks before the Matewan shooting, where he was collecting intel. But once the Matewan shooting happened, 2 of Tom Felt's brothers were killed. At that point, his mission changed, and he became pretty well dedicated by Baldwin Felts to get Sid Hatfield and the others involved in the shootings.
He is such a character. I just can't believe some of the things I read about him. There wasn't anybody that you could interview, obviously, that knew about what was going on. So where did you get most of your information about him?
A whole lot of it come from Thomas Felts, who was the vice president of Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, and they were actually affiliated. Well, I'm not coming up with the right word for it, but them and the Pinkerton agency, they were friends. William Baldwin and Pinkerton were friends, and they kind of had a gentleman's agreement between them. But Thomas Felts was the vice president of Baldwin Felts. He and I forgot what your question is now. Well,
about how did he, who did you interview, or who could you have interviewed to get the information?
Okay, yes. Thomas Felts, because he lost 2 brothers in the Matewan shootout, that case was particularly personal to him. He kept a whole lot of information in the files that he had from this investigation. And he kept that, and it was discovered after his death in one of the businesses he owned, and those records are in the Eastern Regional Coal Archives in Bluefield. And then, along with everything else, there are the articles about him. He went by the name of Everett Lively when he was out west. And so he didn't really start using Charles pretty much till he come back. And I still haven't fully identified where the name Charles come from. I mean, from what I can see in the old census records, he was probably Everett. And so I'm not real clear where some of that came from.
Just maybe his spy name.
Yeah, I suspect he used a lot of names that we don't know.
Yeah. So I could see how much research you had to do, and you and I have talked about this before. Yes. Because writing the Heckler book took a lot of research. Is that something you enjoy, or did that become kind of a mission for you to get it researched so you could write this book?
A little both. I mean, you're a biographer. You know how much you dig into that stuff, and it after a while it becomes you want to get one more nugget, and I've said it before, research is seductive. If you're not careful, you'll get caught up in it, and you never will write the book. And so there came at one point there where I finally decided I'm going to start writing a book. The book was going to be written pretty much chronologically. So I discovered something that went back a few years. I might have to rewrite a chapter, but I probably wouldn't have to rewrite the whole book. But I wanted to make sure I actually wrote the book, because the nuggets and the things that I dug out, people needed to read about. And this is an interesting fellow. It's not a good person, no, but he's certainly an intriguing
Yes, so you, in a sense, you wrote and then researched when you needed more.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did too. Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is a biographer of note, said once that if you're going to live with your subject as long as it takes to complete their biography, you better like them. I hate to ask, did you like Charles Lively?
No. No, it's a little bit odd being being one of the foremost authorities on somebody that you don't think you like very much, that nobody probably like, and it's just fascinating. I did everything I could to search to find something good about this man, and there just isn't hardly anything good to be said about him.
Right. Somebody in your book called him a sociopath.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true?
Yes, I do, and I've had no less than 3 medical professionals tell me that, and
really?
And they looked at the stuff that I had on him and a few of them, and I mean, you know, it's not really perfect practice without the subject there, but about all of them came to the conclusion that this man was indeed a sociopath.
Wow. I mean, you know, if you read and you've got to read the book because it really is fascinating. He spent so much time with the Union, and then he would turn right around and tell the Baldwin Felts people what he'd learned from the Union people. Yeah. And, you know, he'd sworn allegiance to both groups. I mean, he was being paid by one and was a member of the other. And just, he seemed to have absolutely no conscience about what he was doing.
Yeah, and he shot a man to death in Levada, Colorado. And probably, I don't think it was a random shooting. I think this Swan Oline that he killed was a striking miner. I suspect he was targeted, and because Lively did pretty much everything Baldwin Felts told him to, without exception. So I doubt that was random. But he killed a man out there in 1914, and he was imprisoned out there in Wilsonburg, and he spent 16 months in prison. And the whole time he was there, Albert Felts, who managed things out west, who was one of the men killed in May 19th, 1920, but in 1914, he was running Baldwin Felts operations out in the west. And he kept Lively in prison for a corrupt sheriff named Jefferson Farr, which is probably the most corrupt sheriff in Colorado history. They kept him in jail, and when they threw miners in jail, they'd pump him for information. And about 8 days after he killed the man in Levada, Colorado, the Ludlow massacre happened out there, and he probably supplied information that probably led to that. Fact is, the guns that they used to shoot at strikers out there were imported from West Virginia, where they'd used them here. Wow.
And I understand he shot his own son. Why did he do that?
He just got mad at him. This is a man, I know he killed Ed Chambers and Sid Hatfield on August 1st, 1921 on the courthouse steps in Welch, West Virginia. He killed Swan Oline in 1914. He did a lot of other things that we do not know about because he wouldn't talk about some of those, even under oath. But he did a lot of things in Illinois that's the one he wouldn't even discuss. But we know he shot 3 people for sure, and I suspect a lot more. Well, he got mad at his son over, his son possibly tripped his little brother or something, or he thought he did, and he told the boy to come downstairs, and the boy wouldn't come downstairs, and he went outside the house, and somewhere along the line he got a gun, and he shot through the screen his own son there in the kitchen. And just barely missed killing him. Yeah, killing him or paralyzing him for life.
Wow. Well, he is fascinating, that's for sure. Let's talk a little bit about some of your other works.
Okay.
You've written how many novels?
I think 8, 9.
And they're all the same character? Are they all the same character?
No, I've done 5 books about one particular character. I've done about 3 other westerns. I actually did one book involving Mate 1 that was a work of fiction too.
Mm-hmm. Somebody said one time, I think, that most stories are simply either an adventure or a mystery or a love story. But what makes them a Western, for instance, is that they're set in the West. Are your books, are your stories that sort? Is there some sort of adventure, or is it, I mean, is there like a sheriff maybe that's chasing bad guys, so to speak?
Well, the series is about it really started with a man that got out of prison for a crime he didn't actually commit. And it was actually sort of a tale of retribution or revenge. And somewhere along the line, it became a tale of redemption. Mm-hmm. But that was actually a story I'd written called Death Comes to Red Hawk. It was supposed to have been a standalone book. And then I didn't really write Westerns. I quit for almost 17, 18 years, kind of while I was raising my kids, and I had some bad luck with it. And I shouldn't have done that. I'd like to undo that, but it is what it is. And then I came back and I decided I'm going to start writing Westerns, try to get these things published again. And I decided to write another one, and it just so happened I decided that I liked that character. It just started up, and I wrote a second book, and now there's 5 in that series. But the others are pretty much standalone Westerns.
So you're a West Virginian. What drew you to writing Westerns?
Probably my dad. Dad got me interested. Dad took me to John Wayne movies, and he was interested in all things West. We grew up on a cattle farm, and I still dabble in it. I still own a cow, and we dabble in a little bit. And I inherited some of my land off my dad where he got killed a few years ago, and we still put up hay on it. And so I grew up around cows. I still around them all the time, and I think all that stuff put together kind of got me there.
Yeah, I understand. We've talked about this as well too. Do you prefer fiction to nonfiction? Or does it matter?
I probably prefer fiction to nonfiction. My publisher, this book right here, is trying to get me to write a book on the corrupt sheriff that Lively stayed with when he was out west, and I'm actually kind of kicking it around. But
that'd be another biography.
Yeah, it'd be another biography, and that's a lot of work.
Yes, it is.
And I'm not. And honestly, the fiction books, just the Westerns I wrote that are fiction, to me aren't nearly as much work as these are.
Now, they require some research, but not all the footnoting and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it winds up being easier for me than the other, but I enjoy them a lot. But I probably prefer writing novels.
When you begin the idea of a novel, do you outline or do you just go for it, or do you know at least where the book is going by the end?
I somewhat know where the book's going. I don't outline. I don't like the term pantser because I've always thought that was created by people that outliners. And I always asked them, well, what do you fly? That term kind of refers to flying by the seat of your pants. And I kind of wondered, well, what are you flying by when you make your outline? You're flying by the same way we are.
Well,
but
true.
I heard Kathleen Geer, who was just inducted in the Western Writers Hall of Fame, her and her husband, and they both write. And they write together sometimes and separately too. But Kathleen Geer said that she writes what she described as pretty much the way I write. She doesn't outline, doesn't know where the story's going. She struggles through it with her characters. But she also said she doesn't do a bunch of drafts. She said, I'm a block layer. I can't go on until that foundation's right, and everything has to be right. So she doesn't do a lot of drafts. And when I heard her describing that, I thought that is exactly the way I write. But I never heard anybody else ever say that. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating to finally hear somebody that kind of looked at had the same philosophy and approach that I had.
Right. Have you written short stories as well?
A few. I'll tell you what, I think short stories are the toughest thing there is to write that I've ever seen.
Well, that's because we've written so many novels and we're verbose.
Well, it may be that too. I think the hardest thing, and I discovered that writing one of my other books, the hardest thing to do is learning to write short. Mm-hmm. And I think it's if you can learn to write short, I think that makes you even better in the novels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you have some of those published as well? Or they were in journals and that sort of thing? No,
there was a couple of them published. My publisher went out of business last year, another victim of COVID possibly, and then I've got I've signed a contract with another publisher who's going to pick up all my old books plus the manuscript I just completed.
Good, good. So what's your writing routine? You've got a full-time job, which I know is stressful sometimes because it's not always the same hours.
Yeah.
How do you find time to write?
It's a struggle. It truly is. I worked all night last night, and I'm a shift worker. I work a 12-hour shift, and I try to write real hard on I have these 7-day breaks. I especially try to write hard on those, but I can write sometimes while I'm working midnights, but I can't hardly get any writing whatsoever done when I'm working straight day shifts. Mm-hmm. And it's hard working around it. I'm a few years away from retirement, less than 3, and I'm looking forward to the time when I can walk away from that job and write full time. Right,
right. I understand. Do you care to share a little bit about what your new manuscript is about?
My new manuscript is something I really didn't think I had. It's an idea I've had for several years. I have a bunch. Each chapter starting out is about an individual or a group of individuals. And it's an idea I've had for several years. All these people are all looking for water. Everybody, water's a critical element out west. It was 100 years ago. It's still an issue out west. And all these people, a bunch of different characters. There's a woman, there's a sheriff, there's some outlaws, there's an Indian. They're all headed to water, and they all need it. And one of the characters knows they've got to go to it, and they're all it's all gonna culminate in one place, and all their desire or their need to find water is gonna push them all toward there, and that's gonna lead to a meeting of all these individuals all at one time.
With conflict?
Yeah, with some conflict involved, and some of them may not. They're all searching for water, and that pushes them all the same direction. And at least
some may not find it.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds fascinating. Do you have a title for your books as you start them, or a tentative title?
I honestly think I write better when I have a title. I started this one with not having one. Along the way, it became what I call Bitter Water, and. But honestly, I think a title helps me focus a little bit. I think when I got the title and I know where I'm going with it, I think that adds something to my writing for some reason.
That's interesting. Huh. I hadn't thought about that. One more question about the book. You've got a lot of pictures in here. Where did you get those? How did you find the pictures?
Okay, some of those, my wife took some of those.
You all went out? Did you all go out there to Colorado and do research? Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
I actually went to last year, 2 years ago, BC, before COVID. We went to Colorado. Well, actually, we were going to Tucson for a Western Writers Convention. Joellen and I landed in Denver, and we took about a day trip, and got off of Denver, ran a car, drove to Walsenburg, Colorado. Mm-hmm. And then we researched, actually the jail that he stayed in is still there.
Oh, wow.
It's a museum. And it's just like the shooting at the courthouse where he committed the shooting, it's still there too. Mm-hmm. So much of the things involving Lively are still there. But we went there, and I actually found a picture. Two of the pictures of Lively came from the West Virginia State Archives. But I also brought one to the table that I got off a great nephew of Charles Lively, that Stan Baumgartner of Golden Seal magazine told me he never seen that one before. He was kind of thrilled about it. Fact is, I got an article coming up about Lively in its next Golden Seal.
So were you able to interview this great nephew?
I talked to him. Basically, all I got from him was, well, the picture, of course, and he said his dad, they said Lively wasn't a very nice guy. And that's about all I got from him. Mm-hmm. But Lively actually has a daughter-in-law still living. Oh, and for whatever reason, they didn't want to really cooperate with the book. But she has seen it since then, and I've heard she didn't really have any real issues with it. But
well, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that it would be a tough conversation to have with a family member.
Yeah. He had his last son, which would have been her husband, died in about October 2017. I never had a chance to talk to that man, but he was actually the one that signed the last will and testament with Lively. He was executor of the estate.
One thing we didn't talk about was the fact that he was a bigamist.
Yeah. Yeah, along with
Not only was he a spy and a really bad guy to shoot people, he was a bigamist.
He was married to 2 women for 21 years at the same time. And
did they live in 2 different cities, 2 different places?
yes, he lived out in Roanoke. But my understanding is that actually his first wife, his actual wife, Icy, actually, from what that family told me, is they actually knew about each other.
Oh.
That they knew about each other.
Oh, that brings a whole new wrinkle to it. Mercy.
There's nothing, I mean, you just learn more and more, and you just realize this guy is just worse and worse.
He has no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
No, I can't find any. Yeah. And it's sad, really, but I can't find anything good about him.
That's amazing. We were saying earlier that he would come home often enough to have sort of a one-night stand with his wife, had 9 children, and then he'd take off and leave again. Yeah. Poor woman, she had to raise them all, didn't she? And
I'm not really giving anything away because this is all in history, but he wound up killing himself in 1962. In fact, it's 2 years to the day before my wife was born. It's on her birthday he killed himself. But I don't believe that the act of killing himself, I believe that was a selfish action as well, because he was going blind about that time, and I believe he had planned that since he did his last will and testament about January of that year, and he killed himself May 28th. But I think he'd been planning that, and I don't think it was because he felt guilty about what he'd done. He was 75, 76 years old at that time. I think it was the fact he was going blind, and this is a guy that lived independent. He lived his own life for so many years, and I think being reliant on people, I don't think he could take it.
Yeah. Wow. It's a fascinating book, and I've really, really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody will take the opportunity to read it. It's well worth it. It's The 9 Lives of Charles Lively. We'll get a good picture of that up sometime soon. Tell us how to get that book.
Well, you can get that book from my website at rgyoho.com. R's and Robert, G as in George, rgyoho at yahoo.com. You can also go to Amazon and look it up.
Okay. And I guess from bookshop.org, that's another online shop that supports independent publishers. So it's been a real pleasure to talk to you about this.
Thank you, Carter.
I couldn't wait because he's just a reprobate. There's just an old reprobate.
He is that.
Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll chat again another time. Thank you all for being with us. It's been wonderful to have you all watch this interview, and I hope that you will take a chance to pick up the book. It's R.G. Yoho, The 9 Lives of Charles E. Lively, the Deadliest Man in the West Virginia-Colorado Coal Mine Wars. Thank you, and take care, and we'll see you another day.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.